If I'd known how quietly a storm could start, I would have listened closer to the wind that evening. That morning, I got a letter from the county office, an unexpected notice about property verification. I thought it was a clerical error. Just hours later, my daughter Naomi called, cheerful but nervous, saying she and her husband Cole were coming over to talk about the house. That phrase, the house, stuck to me like a thorn. By the time the sun was melting behind the maples, I'd settled on my porch with my usual cup of mint tea. The neighborhood was still, the kind of still that makes you feel you've done something right in life. Children's laughter echoed faintly from 2 doors down. A sprinkler hissed in the distance. The smell of lilac drifted through the air. I rocked gently in my old chair, the one my late husband, Leonard, built before his hands started shaking. I used to tell my students that peace was earned, not gifted. Funny thing, I thought I'd earned mine. Then I said it out loud to the night, almost as if to test the words. I thought peace meant stillness. I didn't realize storms can start in silence. It sounded foolish and wise at the same time. When Naomi's car finally pulled up, I smiled. She stepped out, radiant but a little rushed, always trying to juggle everything. Cole followed behind, tall and polished, his smile rehearsed like he'd practiced it in the rearview mirror. He carried himself like someone arriving to inspect, not visit. Inside, they sat at my kitchen table. Naomi started talking about how cozy everything was, but Cole's eyes moved differently, scanning the walls, the floors, the little porcelain angels on the mantel. "You've kept it just like it was," he said. His tone wasn't admiration. It was evaluation. When I offered them sweet tea, Naomi accepted with a grateful grin. Cole didn't. He just said, "We don't usually do sugar." Small, harmless words, but they hung heavy. I told myself not to overthink it. I'd taught for 32 years, I knew how to read people. But that night, I didn't trust what I read. Before they left, Cole walked out ahead, hands in his pockets. Naomi stayed behind for a soft hug. "He's been stressed," she whispered. "Work's tough." I nodded, though my mind was still on the notice from the county. When the door shut, I saw Cole outside, looking at my flower beds, my mailbox, the porch railings. Not with admiration, but with a quiet, calculating curiosity. And then, for the first time in years, I felt uneasy in my own home. That was the night everything shifted, though nothing yet had been said. As their car backed out of the driveway, Cole glanced at my house one last time, his expression not of a guest leaving, but of an owner measuring where to begin. If you've ever had someone smile at you while quietly claiming what's yours, I'd ask my viewers here, what did you feel first, confusion or fear? Drop it in the comments, because that's exactly what I felt. Naomi called 2 days later, her voice light and affectionate. "Mom, Cole wants to help around your place. He says it's too much for you alone." I wanted to laugh, but something in her tone stopped me. It wasn't the words, it was the way she said "for you." Still, I told her to come by. Maybe I was reading too much into things. Maybe love just sounded different in her generation. When they arrived that Saturday, Cole brought a box of tools. Naomi carried muffins. A perfect balance, charm and control. They walked through the house again, like tourists revisiting a memory. Naomi kept talking about baby names, promotions, new beginnings. I tried to listen, but Cole's eyes moved from the photo of Leonard in uniform to the family Bible on the shelf. He said, "This place could use a man's touch." That sentence landed like a slap wrapped in a smile. I wanted to remind him that Leonard's touch built these walls, that every nail had a memory. But I didn't. I just said, "It stood fine for 40 years. Naomi laughed softly, trying to smooth things over. "Cole's just teasing, Mom." But I saw the way he looked at her when she said it, not with warmth, but with quiet correction. Later, he offered to replace the squeaky porch step. "Just helping out," he said again, in that tone that made help sound like ownership. As he worked, I stood by the doorway, clutching my cup of tea. I thought of my classroom years, how I used to tell my students that kindness without respect isn't kindness at all. It's performance. When the sun set, they packed up to leave. Naomi kissed my cheek, promising to call. Cole nodded curtly, saying, "We'll keep an eye on this place." This place. That night, the neighborhood slept quiet, but I couldn't. Around 10 p.m., I heard a faint metallic sound outside, steady, deliberate, like hammering. I peeked through the curtains. Cole was out there, flashlight in one hand, wrench in the other, replacing my mailbox. My nameplate lay discarded in the grass. He hadn't asked. He hadn't even told me. I didn't step outside. I just stood there, heart thudding softly, realizing that respect can disappear not in an argument, but in a whisper. When he finished, he placed a new nameplate, the Harris family. His family name. Not mine. And that's when I knew this wasn't help. This was a beginning. Have you ever watched someone rewrite your story while you were still living it? Let me know in the comments, because that's what I saw from my window that night. The morning Naomi told me she was pregnant, the air itself seemed to sparkle. She stood in my kitchen, cheeks glowing, hands trembling around a coffee mug she wasn't supposed to be drinking anymore. "I wasn't sure how to tell you," she said, laughing through tears. "You're going to be a grandma, Mom." I forgot every uneasy thing about Cole in that moment. I hugged her so tight she squeaked. For a few minutes, there was only light, soft and golden, like the world itself had been washed clean. Even Cole smiled, his arms circling Naomi protectively. "We'll make this house lively again," he said. "It's been too quiet here." At the time, it sounded like a promise. I started thinking about the old guest room upstairs, the one facing the street where the morning sun slips through the lace curtains. It had been Leonard's study once, then my reading room. But in my heart, I'd already pictured a crib, a rocking chair, and those little glow-in-the-dark stars kids like to stick on the ceiling. That evening, I pulled out fabric swatches and an old paint catalog. "I can start clearing things out," I told Naomi, excitement spilling through my voice. Before she could answer, Cole spoke up from across the room. "That's not your room to decorate." The way he said it, calm but sharp, cut the joy in half. Naomi's smile faltered. "Cole, she's just excited." He shrugged. "Sure. But we'll handle the nursery when the time comes. I've got plans for that space." Plans. The word echoed in my mind. I tried to brush it off, focusing instead on Naomi's glow, her hope. But something quiet inside me tightened, like a string pulled too far. Later, after they left, I went upstairs anyway. The room smelled of dust and cedar. Sunlight streamed across the old carpet, catching the faded imprint of Leonard's desk. I sat by the window and whispered, "Your granddaughter's coming, Lenny." Then, softly to myself, "It's strange how love can make you ignore warning signs." For a few nights, I dreamed of baby laughter echoing through that hallway. But real life came back soon enough. Cole started showing up more often, claiming he was fixing the porch or painting Naomi's old room. Every visit came with new suggestions: move this, sell that, repaint here. Naomi seemed happy he was helping, and I didn't want to dampen her joy. Until one night, I went to grab some extra linens from the upstairs closet. As I passed the nursery room, I heard voices. Naomi's, soft and hopeful, "She's so happy about the baby, Cole. Let her help." And his voice, low, firm, almost territorial, "Once this place is fixed up, we'll make it ours." The word ours hit me like a chill draft under a locked door. I stood there in the dark hallway, hand pressed to the wall, realizing this wasn't about family anymore. It was about control. That night, as I lay in bed, I couldn't sleep. The ceiling fan hummed softly, and I kept replaying his words, "We'll make it ours." Have you ever been so happy one moment, then so uneasy the next that you didn't know which feeling to trust? Tell me in the comments, because that's where I was, suspended between joy and warning. Disrespect doesn't always arrive with shouting. Sometimes, it sneaks in under the name of help. Cole started helping a lot after that. First, it was rearranging the living room. Then, without asking, He boxed up old books from the shelf, Leonard's books, saying they made the place look cluttered. When I came home from the grocery store one afternoon, the boxes were stacked by the front door, labeled donation. My chest went cold. Cole! I called. He appeared from the hallway, wiping dust off his hands. What is this? Just tidying up. You said you wanted more space. I hadn't. Before I could reply, Naomi stepped in, gently touching my arm. He's just trying to help, Mom. You know how he is. I did know. That was the problem. That night, after they left, I unsealed the boxes and quietly put everything back where it belonged, each photo frame, each old novel, each memory that still smelled like the past. I moved slower than usual, not from age, but from heartbreak. As I lifted one photo, the one of Leonard standing by his chalkboard, smiling in that patient teacher way, the frame slipped from my hand. It hit the floor, glass shattering across the tile. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. It wasn't just glass breaking. It was something deeper, the fragile boundary that had once kept my world safe. I cleaned up the shards carefully, whispering, "I'm sorry, Lenny," as if he could hear me from wherever good men go when they're done protecting what they love. The next morning, Cole arrived again, cheerful as ever. "We're making progress," he said, patting my shoulder like a manager inspecting an employee's work. I wanted to scream, "This is my house." But Naomi's bright eyes met mine, full of joy about the baby, about the future. I swallowed my pride, my words, my fear, all of it. That evening, as they packed up to leave, I heard them talking by the doorway. I didn't mean to listen, but the words came through clear. Cole's voice first, firm and certain, "Your mom's time here is ending. We need space for our family." Naomi hesitated. "Cole, this is her home." He replied, colder this time. "Not for long." He didn't know I was standing by the hall, hidden in shadow, holding the cracked photo frame in my hand like a weapon I'd never use. For a long moment, I didn't move. The house didn't either. It felt like even the walls were holding their breath, waiting to see what I'd do next. If you overheard someone planning to take what's yours, would you confront them, or wait and let them hang themselves with their own words? Tell me below, because that's the choice I had to make that night. That morning began like any other, sunlight spilling gently across the table, the kettle whistling, the sound of distant lawnmowers humming through the neighborhood. I'd just returned from volunteering at the library, still smelling faintly of paper and dust. There was a kind of peace in helping others read, the same peace I once found in the classroom. But peace has a way of ending without warning. As I turned the corner to my street, something caught my eye, a flash of color across the yard. Then another. And another. When I pulled into the driveway, my breath caught in my throat. Boxes, my boxes, were scattered across the porch and lawn like garbage after a storm. Books. Photo albums. Leonard's teaching awards. My old lesson plans, the ones I couldn't bear to throw away. Even the quilt Naomi and I had stitched together one summer when she was 12, draped carelessly over a cracked flower pot. For a second, I thought there'd been a break-in. Then I saw him. Cole. Standing by the doorway, arms crossed, smirk painted on his face. "Afternoon," he said, as if we were strangers meeting in passing. What happened here?" My voice came out quieter than I expected. He gestured toward the boxes. "Just clearing out some space. This old stuff was taking up the whole upstairs." I felt my heart thudding, slow and heavy. "You went through my things?" He shrugged. "Someone had to. My baby's gonna need a nursery, remember?" The word baby should have filled me with joy. Instead, it felt like a weapon he'd learned to swing. I walked past him, kneeling to pick up a stack of letters tied with a faded blue ribbon, Leonard's handwriting across each envelope. My hands trembled, but not from fear. From something colder. "Put those down," I said softly. He laughed. "Relax, Marlene. None of this stuff matters anymore. It's just old junk." I looked up at him. The sun hit his face just enough to show the arrogance in his smile, the kind of arrogance that comes from believing no one will ever challenge you. Then something inside me settled. A quiet, trembling calm. I rose to my feet, holding Leonard's letters to my chest. The air around us felt heavy, like even the wind had stopped to listen. I stepped closer, close enough that he had to look down to meet my eyes. Then clear out one more piece of trash, I said evenly. From my house. For a heartbeat, he didn't move. Then his smile widened, slow and mocking. Your house? He said, laughter bubbling from his throat. You sure about that? The words hit like a hammer to glass. I stood there, the letters still pressed against my chest, realizing the storm wasn't coming, it was already here. Have you ever been pushed so far that calm became your only defense? Comment yes if you've ever had to choose silence just to stay strong. The next morning, the sky hung low and gray, as if it had been watching too. I opened my front door to the mess I hadn't finished cleaning. My life still scattered across the porch. My neighbors, the Cunninghams across the street, were pretending to water their lawn. Mrs. Cunningham's eyes flicked toward me once, then quickly away. Curtains shifted in the house next door. Pity. Judgment. Gossip. All of it floated in the air like humidity. I bent down and started picking up my things. One by one. A photograph of my old classroom. A cracked coffee mug that said Best Teacher 1997. The small wooden plaque that Leonard made me our first Christmas, carved with the words home is earned. They all had dirt on them now. I brushed each item off carefully, almost tenderly, while Cole's voice echoed in my head, you sure about that? Halfway through gathering my things, I heard the screech of tires. Naomi's car pulled up fast, door slamming before the engine even quieted. Mom, she gasped, running toward me. What happened? I didn't answer. I just handed her the quilt. Cole followed behind her, slower, acting confused. It was a misunderstanding, he said. I was cleaning up. I didn't mean. Naomi turned on him. You threw her things out? How could you? He raised his hands, voice calm. Naomi, you're overreacting. I thought we agreed to make more space for the baby. I didn't know she'd take it personally. I could see Naomi's heart breaking in her eyes, caught between the man she married and the mother who raised her. Please, I said softly. Let's not fight in the yard. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I just kept picking up pieces of my life while the people I loved argued over them. By noon, the boxes were inside again, though everything felt out of place. The air was thick with unspoken things. Naomi left early, saying she needed to rest. Cole lingered a moment longer at the door. You made a scene today, he said, his tone quieter now, more controlled. I don't like scenes. I didn't answer. I just closed the door gently in his face. When the house fell silent again, I stood in the middle of the living room, surrounded by boxes, dust, and the faint smell of rain coming through the open window. I thought about all the children I'd taught over the years, hundreds of them. Some respectful, some defiant, but all teachable. And here I was, being schooled by arrogance in my own home. I'd taught hundreds of children respect, I whispered. And now I was being schooled in silence. That night, I double-locked my door. The metal clicked louder than usual, sharp, final, echoing through the empty hallway. For the first time in 40 years, I wondered if I was truly safe in my own house. As I turned off the porch light, I saw movement through the window, a shadow crossing my yard. Cole's car was still parked by the curb. Engine running. Lights off. If someone crossed a line that deep in your own home, would you let it go, or start planning how to take your power back? Tell me what you'd do, because that's the question that kept me awake all night. The house had gone silent after that night, the kind of silence that presses on your chest. Even the floorboards seemed to creak softer, afraid to draw attention. It was close to 8 when I heard a knock on my door. Soft. Hesitant. Mama? Naomi's voice, small again, like when she used to come to my room after a bad dream. I opened the door. She stood there in her slippers, holding a tray. 2 plates of meatloaf, mashed potatoes, and the smell of baked cornbread. Her eyes were red. "I brought you dinner," she whispered. "I didn't want you eating alone." I let her in. We sat together on the edge of the bed, the same bed where I'd once read her bedtime stories. She picked at her food, unable to meet my eyes. "He didn't mean it that way," she murmured finally. "Cole, he just says things without thinking." I set my fork down. The way someone means a thing doesn't change what it is. She blinked fast, her lip trembling. "Mama, he's stressed. The baby's coming, the bills, work." "Naomi." I placed my hand gently on hers. "There's a difference between stress and cruelty." Her eyes filled, but she didn't argue. That told me more than words ever could. We ate in silence for a while. The lamp cast soft light across her face, tired, conflicted, still beautiful. I remembered her as a little girl with pigtails, promising she'd always take care of me when I grew old. Now, she couldn't even protect herself. "Do you love him?" I asked quietly. She looked startled. "Of course I do. He's my husband." "That's not what I asked." She didn't answer. I sighed, leaning back against the headboard. "Love isn't supposed to make you small, Naomi. It's supposed to make you safe." Tears slid down her cheek. "He said I have to choose, Mama. He said we can't raise a child in a house where there's tension." For a second, I couldn't breathe. The words choose and child collided in my chest. "I'd never ask you to choose," I said softly. "But I hope one day you see who's really forcing that choice." Naomi stood, setting the tray aside. She tried to smile, but it broke halfway. "I just want peace." "So do I said. "But peace built on silence doesn't last." She hugged me quickly, like she was afraid he'd notice she was gone too long. Then she slipped out, leaving her plate half-finished. The room fell quiet again. That's when I saw it, a small box that had fallen from one of the storage bins near the closet. Leonard's handwriting across the top, private letters. My heart tugged. I hadn't opened those since he passed. I lifted the lid and found a stack of envelopes, neatly tied with twine. His handwriting, strong and slanted. Most were dated from our early marriage, love letters from another life. But near the bottom was one with a note scribbled in pencil: "Property documents, keep separate for safety." I frowned. I didn't remember any property papers being stored with our letters. Inside the envelope was a small, folded page. My husband's words. "If anything ever happens to me, make sure the deed stays separate. Don't let anyone pressure you into changing it. This home was built for you, and it should stay in your name." My hand shook. The last line was underlined twice. I read it 3 times before realizing what it meant. He hadn't just left me memories. He'd left me protection. I looked toward the door, toward the hallway where Cole's footsteps echoed faintly, and felt something shift deep inside me. Not fear. Not anger. Something steadier. Have you ever discovered a truth so powerful, it made silence feel like armor? Tell me in the comments, what would you have done after finding that letter? Sleep didn't come that night. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling fan as it turned slow and steady, my mind replaying Leonard's words over and over. The deed stays separate. What did he mean by separate? By dawn, I was sitting at the kitchen table, the letter open beside a cold cup of tea. The first sunlight crept across the linoleum like it was trying not to disturb me. Something inside me whispered, "Go look." I found my old filing box in the hallway closet, metal, dented, heavier than I remembered. Inside were birth certificates, tax papers, and a dozen old keys on a ring. One key stood out. Small, brass, labeled in Leonard's handwriting: "Safe deposit, Oakview Bank." My pulse quickened. Oakview was 2 towns over, the bank where Leonard had opened our first joint account 40 years ago. By the time I got dressed and drove there, the sky was bright and cloudless. The kind of day that tries to convince you everything's fine. Inside the bank, the air smelled of carpet cleaner and cold metal. A young teller greeted me politely, her name tag reading Grace. I believe my husband kept a safe deposit box here, I said. Leonard Bishop. She typed for a moment, then looked up. Yes, ma'am. It's still active, in both your names. My chest tightened. Both? Yes, she smiled. You're listed as co-owner. Grace led me to a small, quiet room in the back. She unlocked the vault, retrieved a thin, silver box, and handed it to me with gloved hands. Take your time, she said gently. I sat down. My fingers hovered over the latch for a long moment before opening it. Inside were only two things, a folded document and a small envelope with Leonard's handwriting again. I opened the envelope first. If you're reading this, my love, it means I'm gone. You always took care of me, this is how I take care of you. The deed is yours alone. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise. I unfolded the document. There it was, the official property deed. Stamped, sealed, and titled solely in my name, Marlene Bishop. No mention of Leonard. No mention of anyone else. Tears filled my eyes, but not from sadness this time. From relief. From gratitude. He never left me without protection, I whispered. For years, I'd told myself Leonard's strength died with him. But here it was, tucked in paper and ink, waiting quietly to remind me who I was. By the time I left the bank, my spine felt straighter. My steps slower but steadier. The air outside smelled different, sharper, cleaner. I tucked the deed safely in my purse and stepped into the sunlight. That's when I saw it. Across the street, parked just far enough to look casual, was Cole's truck. Engine idling. Windows tinted. My heartbeat stumbled. He was watching me. I met his gaze through the glass, even though I couldn't see his eyes. I didn't flinch. For the first time in weeks, I wasn't afraid of him. I walked to my car, unlocked the door, and started the engine. My hands were steady on the wheel. Let him watch. Let him wonder what I'd found. Because for the first time, I wasn't the one in the dark. As I pulled away, I caught a glimpse of him in the mirror, Cole stepping out of the truck, phone pressed to his ear, his expression tight. Whatever game he thought he was playing, it was about to change. What would you do if the person who disrespected you suddenly realized you held all the power? By the time the sun went down, the house smelled of rosemary and roasted chicken. Cole was in the kitchen, humming like he'd just discovered charm. Naomi moved around him quietly, trying to keep up the illusion of normal. When I walked in, he turned with a wide grin. Hey, Ma. Look who's cooking tonight. He said it loud enough for the neighbors to hear through the walls, the man who'd tossed my things into the yard now playing the role of the loving son-in-law. I smiled politely. Smells good. He poured wine into 3 glasses, sliding one toward me. Let's put all that unpleasantness behind us. We're family. Naomi's eyes darted between us. She wanted this dinner to mean something. A truce, maybe. But peace offered by the guilty always comes with a price. We sat. The air was thick with unspoken things. The only sound was the ticking clock on the wall, sharp and rhythmic, like a heartbeat that refused to slow. Cole carved the chicken, all smiles. I was thinking, he said casually, about what's next for the house. Once the baby comes, we'll need to rearrange some things. My fork paused midway. Rearrange? Yeah, he chuckled, just practical stuff. You've had a long run here, Ma. Maybe it's time you let us handle things. I set my fork down gently, folded my hands in my lap. Handle what belongs to you, not what doesn't. The smile on his face faltered. Naomi looked up sharply. Mama, she began, but I raised my hand slightly. Let him finish. Cole leaned back, that smirk crawling back into place. Look, I'm just trying to help. You've done great keeping this place up, but come on, times change. True, I said softly. And so do people. The ticking clock filled the silence again. Tick. 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 He laughed awkwardly. You make it sound like I'm the enemy. I tilted my head. Are you? Naomi shifted in her chair. Can we please not do this right now? I smiled at her, a gentle, motherly smile that didn't reach my eyes. We're just talking, sweetheart. Then, without breaking eye contact with Cole, I reached down and slid my purse under the chair. The deed folder was inside, crisp, clean, heavy with truth. He didn't notice, but I saw his eyes flick toward it. The smallest glance, the briefest twitch, but enough. He wanted it. Needed it. I leaned forward. Cole, there's one thing I've learned in this house. When someone keeps trying to take what isn't theirs, sooner or later, the house itself spits them out. He frowned. What's that supposed to mean? It means, I said, standing, some things are handled already. Naomi looked between us, confused, but I didn't explain. I didn't need to. I picked up my plate, carried it to the sink, and began washing it as though the conversation had ended. The sound of running water filled the air, cleansing, steady, final. Behind me, I heard him mutter something under his breath. Something that sounded a lot like, we'll see about that. I turned off the faucet, wiped my hands, and said over my shoulder, yes. We will. As I walked out of the kitchen, the clock ticked louder. Cole's smile was gone. Naomi's hand trembled on her glass. Under my chair, the deed folder sat, and for the first time, I felt its weight as power, not paper. Have you ever smiled through a dinner where you knew someone was plotting against you? Sunday morning came dressed in quiet grace. The sky was clear, the air light with promise. I wore my lavender dress, Leonard's favorite, and left for church with my Bible pressed against my chest. Behind me, the house looked peaceful. But I'd learned peace can be the mask of war. While hymns filled the chapel, something darker was unraveling back home. Cole stood in the hallway, hands on his hips, eyes narrowing at my closed bedroom door. He waited until Naomi left to run errands. Then he slipped inside. The room smelled of lavender oil and cedar. He started with the closet, pulling boxes from the top shelf, rifling through drawers. He checked the desk, the nightstand, even under the bed. Nothing. Frustration twisted his face. He went to the dresser, yanked the bottom drawer open, scattering old scarves and framed photos. He froze when he saw a brown envelope. Inside were old letters, Leonard's handwriting. He skimmed through them, sneering at the tenderness, the loyalty he'd never understand. Then Naomi's voice came from the doorway. What are you doing? He spun around, startled. I was looking for a bill. Your mom. Don't lie to me. Her voice was trembling but fierce. You're going through her things. He slammed the drawer shut. I'm just making sure she's not hiding something that could mess up our plans. Our plans, she repeated. Cole, what are you talking about? He stepped closer, his voice lowering into that sharp, cold tone she'd started to recognize. You think I don't know? She's up to something. I've seen her sneaking around, hiding papers. That house, she's trying to take it from us. Naomi's eyes widened. Take it from us? It's her house. He laughed, a short, ugly sound. Not for long. Once the baby's born, things will be different. Everything here will be mine. The words hung in the air like a slap. Naomi went pale. Yours, she whispered. Is that what this has been about all along? Cole didn't answer. His silence was confirmation enough. Naomi took a shaky breath, tears welling up. You said this was about building a family. About love. He smirked. Love doesn't pay the mortgage. She stepped back, disgust washing over her face. You're not building a family. You're taking one apart. For the first time, she saw him clearly, not the man she'd married, but the man behind the mask. He saw the change in her eyes, and it scared him. "Don't look at me like that," he hissed. "Everything I've done for us." Naomi shook her head. "No, Cole. You did it for yourself." He took a step toward her. "Watch your tone." But she didn't move this time. "No," she said, steady now. "I've watched enough." He froze, realizing, too late, that the power had just shifted. That evening, I came home humming softly, the church bulletin still in my purse. I knew something was off the moment I stepped through the door. The air felt charged. Naomi was sitting on the couch, staring at nothing. Her eyes were red but steady. Cole wasn't in sight. I set down my bag. "Where is he?" "Out back," she said quietly. "He's been drinking since noon." I didn't ask why. I didn't have to. I went to my room, shut the door, and sat on the edge of the bed. The house creaked softly, like it was listening. I opened my drawer and pulled out the deed. The paper felt warm, alive almost, as if Leonard's hand still rested on it. Outside, the wind rustled through the trees. The sky had turned copper with sunset. I looked toward the ceiling and whispered, "Tomorrow, he'll learn whose roof he's standing under." The next morning, Marlene's quiet vengeance begins, not with shouting, but with truth. Have you ever reached a point where silence becomes your strongest weapon? Comment below if you've ever chosen peace over revenge. Morning broke in soft gray light, the kind that makes everything feel heavier, as if the sky itself is holding its breath. The house was silent except for the low hum of the refrigerator and the occasional groan of old wood shifting in the early chill. Naomi left for work before sunrise. She stood by the door with her coffee mug, whispering, "I'll be back early, Mama. Call me if he..." I cut her off gently. "Go on, sweetheart. You've done enough worrying for one lifetime." She hesitated, then kissed my cheek. Her eyes said everything she couldn't. The car started, rolled down the street, and disappeared into the fog. Cole was still upstairs, pretending to sleep in. But I knew that kind of stillness, the quiet before the strike. I sat at the kitchen table, tea cooling beside me, and watched the morning light crawl across the floorboards. Everything looked so ordinary. The same table I'd graded papers on for 30 years. The same chipped mug Leonard bought me in Wisconsin. The same house we built together from paychecks and patience. But today, something had shifted. Today was not about mourning what was taken. It was about reclaiming what was never lost. I rose slowly and began my quiet ritual, folding things that mattered, leaving behind what didn't. A photo of my husband went into the suitcase first, then the letters he wrote me during his first teaching assignment. My old chalkboard nameplate, Mrs. Marlene Grant, Literature Department, slid in next. Not because I planned to leave, but because I knew what was coming. Some people fight with noise. I learned to fight with paper. Cole's footsteps thundered down the stairs around 9. His cologne arrived first, sharp and synthetic, like the man himself. He glanced at the suitcase by the door. "You going somewhere?" I didn't answer. I kept folding a scarf. He smirked. "Good. You're finally getting the message. Naomi and I talked, we need the nursery ready before the weekend." "Do you now?" I said softly. "Yeah," he continued, voice rising as if volume would make him right. "I've been patient, Marlene, but this arrangement doesn't make sense anymore. You've had your time here. It's time to clear out." I turned to face him fully. "By evening, you said?" He blinked, thrown off. "What?" "You said to clear out by evening," I repeated calmly. "Is that the deadline you'd like me to honor?" He squinted at me, trying to gauge the tone. I gave him nothing, just stillness. "Yeah," he said finally. "By evening." I nodded once. "All right, Cole." He stared at me for a moment, clearly unsettled by my lack of reaction. The man thrived on chaos, yelling, defense, panic. When none of it came, he seemed almost confused. He grumbled something under his breath and stomped away. The front door slammed behind him. I exhaled slowly, then walked to the hall closet. From the top shelf, I pulled down the manila envelope I'd prepared the night before. Inside, the original property deed, notarized and signed by both Leonard and me. Attached to it were photocopies, certified by the county recorder's office just yesterday morning. I smiled faintly. Leonard had once told me, paper doesn't yell, but it wins every argument. By noon, I'd finished setting the stage. I cleaned the living room, set fresh flowers on the table, and opened the curtains so sunlight poured through like a silent witness. The house smelled like lemon oil and resolve. Around 3, I brewed another pot of tea and sat by the window, watching the wind stir the maple leaves outside. Neighbors passed, glancing curiously, the same ones who had watched me pick my belongings off the lawn. I wondered what stories they'd told over dinner about the old widow and her troublemaking son-in-law. If only they knew what was coming. Evening arrived slowly, the air thick with humidity. Cole came home with 2 friends, men who looked like they'd stepped out of the same mold, loud, self-satisfied, carrying cheap beer and arrogance in equal measure. "House still standing," one of them joked as they walked in. Cole laughed. "Barely. We're remodeling soon anyway." Their laughter filled the room like smoke. I stayed in the kitchen, invisible, letting them have their moment. They sprawled across the living room, cracking jokes, turning up the TV. I heard Cole bragging, his favorite pastime. "Place needs my touch," he said. "Once I get things sorted, I'll refinance. Put it in my name. You know how it is, older folks forget how paperwork works." Older folks. Paperwork. I smiled into my teacup. Around 8, the laughter got louder, sloppier. Cole turned the music up, tapping his beer can against the armrest. "Naomi's got it easy," he said to his friends. "Her mama's living rent-free." Well, not for long. That was my cue. I stepped out from the hallway, slow, deliberate. Every head turned. For a moment, you could hear nothing but the soft hum of the ceiling fan. I was wearing my Sunday dress again, the lavender one. The same one Leonard always said made me look like peace itself. I carried the manila envelope in one hand and the property deed in the other. Cole's grin faded. "What's this?" I looked at his friends, who were now whispering to each other nervously. "Good evening, gentlemen," I said calmly. "I apologize for interrupting your gathering. But since you're all witnesses, perhaps it's time for a little clarity." Cole stood, face tightening. "Marlene, not now." I ignored him. I walked to the center of the room, placed the deed on the coffee table, and smoothed the edges with care. "This house," I began, "was built in 1989. Paid for in full by Leonard and me. The deed has remained solely in my name since the day he passed." His friends exchanged uneasy looks. Cole forced a laugh. "What are you talking about?" "You're confused, Marlene. We've gone over this." "No," I interrupted softly. "You've gone around it. There's a difference." I opened the envelope and slid out the documents one by one, the certified copies, the bank receipts, the notarized page. Each paper landed with a quiet, deliberate sound, like a gavel hitting wood. He stepped closer, his face reddening. "You think a few papers?" "Not a few," I said. "Official. Verified. Legal." The color drained from his face. His friends were silent now, eyes darting between us like spectators at a slow-motion collision. I leaned on the back of a chair, steady and calm. I've taught hundreds of students over the years. One lesson I never stopped repeating: when someone tries to rewrite the truth, always go back to the original text. He swallowed hard. "You can't." "I can," I said, my voice cutting clean through his. "And I already have." This morning, I filed notice with the county to reaffirm ownership. Any attempt to refinance or alter the property title will now require my direct signature and legal representation. His jaw clenched. You went behind my back? No, Cole, I said softly. I went behind your lies. His friend stood awkwardly, muttering excuses. One of them whispered, Hey man, we should probably head out. They slipped past me quickly, leaving him alone in the echo of his own bravado. He turned on me then, eyes sharp and mean. You think you've won? You've embarrassed me in front of everyone. I met his glare evenly. You embarrassed yourself. I just turned on the light. He stepped forward, chest heaving. You think this is over? I didn't move. I think it's just begun. For a long moment, we stood there, predator and teacher, pride and patience. Then, without another word, I picked up the deed, slid it back into the envelope, and turned toward the stairs. As I walked past him, I said quietly, The house remembers who built it, Cole. You might live here, but you'll never own it. He didn't follow. He couldn't. The storm outside broke then, thunder rolling through the sky, rain slapping against the windows. I paused halfway up the stairs and looked back once. He was still standing in the living room, drenched in silence, the papers spread out like judgment across the table. In that moment, the house itself seemed to breathe again. I whispered to the dark, Leonard, we did it. Lightning flashed outside, illuminating Cole's pale face. He wasn't finished, I could feel it. But neither was I. Would you confront someone who tried to take what was rightfully yours, even if it meant standing alone? I still remember the sound of their laughter that night. It floated through my house like smoke, thick, arrogant, and careless. Cole had invited a few of his buddies over, saying they were helping him plan renovations. I didn't bother to ask what renovations. I already knew. Every laugh, every careless scrape of a chair against my hardwood floors felt like a reminder, he believed this house already belonged to him. But I wasn't angry. Anger is loud. Power is quiet. That evening, I took my time. I made tea, the way I always do, 2 spoons of honey, 1 of lemon. My hands didn't shake as I placed the cup on its saucer. I had spent enough years teaching children how to handle their tempers. It was time to remind myself of the same lesson. The manila envelope sat beside the teacup. The deed rested inside, the very proof of what I had built, what my husband and I had protected with our sweat and our years. I had read that piece of paper so many times that the words were burned into my memory. Property of Marlene Porter. Registered 1987. I could still see my husband's handwriting in the corner where he had written, Keep this safe, just in case. He had known something I didn't. Maybe men who build houses understand that storms always come, sometimes with rain, sometimes wearing a smile. I waited until I heard the sound of their laughter peak, the clinking of glasses, the bragging tone in Cole's voice. Then, I rose from my chair and walked into the living room. The moment I appeared, the noise dipped. 4 men sat around my dining table, as if it belonged to them. Cole looked up, smirk tugging at his mouth. Evening, Ma, he said, pretending civility. Didn't mean to wake you. I smiled. You didn't wake me, Cole. I was never asleep. He leaned back, confident. Good, then you can hear me out. I was just telling the guys, once we get this place remodeled, we'll finally have some space. Naomi's been talking about turning the den into a nursery. I didn't reply. Instead, I placed the envelope on the table and slid it toward him. The sound of the paper brushing the wood cut through the silence. What's this? He asked, his tone playful but uneasy. The truth, I said. His friends chuckled nervously. One of them muttered, oh, under his breath. Cole tore the envelope open and glanced inside. Then he laughed, that hollow, condescending laugh that fills a room and leaves it colder. A piece of paper? What's this supposed to prove? I looked him straight in the eye. That your arrogance has been squatting in my home. The laughter stopped. Even the ticking clock on the wall seemed to pause. He frowned, pulling the deed out, flipping through it as if he expected it to change under his gaze. When his eyes reached the line that read owner, Marlene Porter, the color drained from his face. I read it aloud for everyone to hear. Property of Marlene Porter. Registered 1987. His friends exchanged glances, whispering. One of them said quietly, "Wait, this house is hers?" Cole tried to chuckle again, but it caught in his throat. "That doesn't mean anything. Naomi and we live here now." "That makes it ours too." "Living somewhere," I said softly, "doesn't make it yours, Cole. Ask any landlord." I saw something flicker in his eyes, fear, maybe, or realization. But pride is a strong drug. He wouldn't let the truth sober him just yet. He slammed the paper down. "You think waving this around makes you powerful? You're just a lonely old woman clinging to the past." I didn't flinch. "You're right about one thing," I said. "I am holding on, but not to the past. To my dignity." There was a stillness after that, a kind of sacred pause that always comes before truth finishes its work. The front door opened just then. Naomi's voice floated in from the hallway, light and unsuspecting. "Cole? Mom? What's going on?" When she stepped into the living room and saw the scene, her husband red-faced, his friend silent, and me standing calm with papers in hand, her eyes went wide. "Mom, what's happening?" I turned toward her. "Sweetheart, do you know whose name is on this deed?" She hesitated, glancing between us. I thought it was both of yours." "Dad and yours." I nodded. "Your father made sure this house would never belong to anyone who didn't respect it." Cole scoffed. "Don't listen to this, Naomi. She's twisting things." "Enough," I said, my voice low but sharp enough to cut the air. "You've spoken enough in this house." Naomi looked at him, and for the first time, she didn't see her charming husband. She saw the man behind the mask. Her lips trembled. "Cole, did you throw out her things?" He didn't answer. Silence was its own confession. Naomi covered her mouth, eyes filling. I could have gloated. I could have shouted. But pride wasn't what I wanted. I wanted peace, and peace never comes through noise. I folded the deed carefully, placed it back into the envelope, and set it at the center of the table like a verdict. "You said you wanted space for your family," I said quietly. "You'll have plenty, outside these walls." The words hung there, heavy and final. One of Cole's friends whispered, "Man, let's go," and stood up. The others followed, muttering excuses, unable to meet my eyes. The room emptied until it was just the three of us, Naomi, pale and shaking, Cole, frozen between rage and humiliation, and me, steady as the walls that had held us all. Cole's voice broke the silence. "You can't do this. I've put money into this place, work." I raised a hand. "And I appreciate your help. But understand this, Cole, a man can repaint a room in a house he doesn't own. That doesn't make it his." He slammed his fist against the table, rattling the cups. "You think you can just throw me out?" I didn't raise my voice. "No, Cole. I think you threw yourself out the moment you disrespected what built this home." Naomi cried softly in the corner, whispering, "I didn't know. I didn't know any of this." I turned to her gently. "It's not your fault, sweetheart. Love blinds us. But truth clears the fog." Cole stepped closer, towering over me, his voice shaking. "You're making a mistake." I looked up at him, calm and unafraid. "No, Cole. You did. The day you forgot whose roof you stood under." He stared at me for a long time, searching for weakness, maybe expecting tears. But I gave him nothing. I had already mourned everything he could take from me. Finally, he turned away, pacing, breathing hard. Naomi watched him, horror and confusion mixing on her face. "Cole, maybe you should just go cool off," she whispered. He spun on her. "You're taking her side?" Naomi shook her head, tears spilling. No, I'm taking the side of respect. You've crossed every line. For a moment, I saw it, the crumbling of his pride. The man who thought he could control everyone had just realized he controlled nothing at all. He pointed at me, voice trembling with rage. You'll regret this. I met his stare. I already regretted letting it go on this long. He stood there for a moment, then stormed past us, the door slamming so hard the picture frames rattled. The silence that followed was heavy, but not painful. It felt like air returning to a suffocating room. Naomi collapsed into a chair, covering her face. Mama, I'm so sorry. I knelt beside her, taking her hand. You have nothing to apologize for, baby. This house has seen storms before. It will survive this one too. She sobbed quietly, then whispered, What will we do now? I smiled faintly. We'll start by locking the door. That night, I sat alone in the living room. The same room that had once echoed with disrespect now felt still again, like the house itself was exhaling. I looked at the deed lying on the table under the soft glow of the lamp. My husband's handwriting still visible, his faith in me alive through every word. I thought about the years I'd spent teaching children to read, to speak with kindness, to stand up for what's right. Funny how life always brings you back to your own lessons. Some fights aren't won by shouting. They're won by standing still, by knowing who you are, and refusing to move from that truth. As I turned off the light, I whispered to myself, he thought I was just a widow holding on to old things. He forgot that some things aren't old, they're sacred. The house settled with a soft creak, as if agreeing with me. And somewhere deep inside, I felt it, that quiet, triumphant calm that comes not from revenge, but from reclamation. Tomorrow would bring more questions. Maybe even more conflict. But tonight, the truth sat on my table, and that was enough. I didn't know it yet, but by morning, Cole would come back, not for forgiveness, but for a fight. The sound of the vase shattering still rings in my ears. I can see the pieces glinting on the hardwood floor, tiny shards of porcelain catching the light from the chandelier above. Cole's voice still echoes down the hallway, loud and unrestrained, the kind of voice that fills a house and leaves it empty afterward. I don't move at first. I stand still, one hand resting on the edge of the dining table where the deed still lies open, the ink glistening faintly under the light. My breathing is calm, too calm, perhaps, but inside, something deeper hums like a quiet current, resolve. I hear Naomi's voice break somewhere behind me. Mom, I'm so sorry, she whispers, her words trembling through the heavy silence. When I turn, I see her shoulders shaking. She's on her knees, picking up the broken pieces of the vase, her hands trembling so badly that one shard slices her finger. A thin line of red appears. Without thinking, I kneel beside her and gently take the pieces from her hands. Leave it, I tell her softly. It's just glass. She looks up at me, eyes wide and full of shame. He didn't mean to. I cut her off gently. The way someone means a thing doesn't change what it is. That line has been echoing in my head for weeks now, but tonight, it feels heavier, truer. She drops her gaze, silent tears slipping down her face. We sit there on the floor together for a long moment. The air smells like dust and old paint, the kind that always rises when anger has passed through a room. I can still hear the echo of Cole's boots outside, the truck door slamming, the engine starting, tires crunching over gravel. Then, quiet. Only the ticking of the wall clock remains. I press my palm to Naomi's cheek and lift her chin. Baby, I whisper, love doesn't mean staying blind. It means seeing clearly, and still wishing them peace. Her lips tremble, but she nods. I thought he'd change once the baby came. She trails off, shaking her head. I sigh, that deep kind of sigh that comes from the bones, not the lungs. We all think we can love people into being better, I say. But sometimes, love means standing still while they walk away. Naomi leans her head on my shoulder. For the first time in months, I feel her like I used to, not as a distant daughter trapped between guilt and loyalty, but as my child again. I run my hand through her hair, remembering the little girl who used to fall asleep beside me while I graded essays and wrote lesson plans late into the night. Now she's grown, carrying a life inside her, and I realize that this is what motherhood really means, not keeping them safe from pain, but teaching them how to stand through it. The house settles around us. Somewhere in the kitchen, the refrigerator hums. Outside, a wind brushes against the porch, rattling the old chimes by the window. I look around and notice how quiet the place feels now, not empty, but peaceful, like it's taking its first deep breath after a storm. After a while, Naomi goes to wash her hands. I stay behind, sweeping the shards of glass into a dustpan. Each sound, the sweep, the clink, the soft scrape, feels final, like punctuation marks at the end of a long sentence. When she comes back, she hesitates at the doorway. "Mom," she says quietly, "what if he comes back?" I straighten up, holding the dustpan. "Then he'll find the door closed," I reply. "And I'll be standing behind it, calm, not afraid." She studies me for a moment, searching for something in my eyes. Maybe strength. Maybe certainty. Maybe forgiveness. Whatever it is, I hope she finds it. I empty the shards into the trash and close the lid. The sound of it echoes lightly, the sound of something ending. Hours pass. Naomi falls asleep on the couch, exhaustion pulling her down. I sit in my chair near the window, the same one I used to grade papers in, the one where my late husband, Harold, would bring me coffee every morning before his shift at the mill. I look toward the mantel where our wedding photo once stood before Cole moved it. Now it's back in place, the glass still cracked, but I don't mind. Cracks, after all, just show where something has survived pressure. I think of Harold, of the quiet wisdom he always carried, the way he'd look at me when the world got loud and say, "Don't raise your voice. Raise your ground." That's what tonight felt like, not a battle, but a reclaiming. Just after midnight, headlights flash across the window. My body stiffens, but I don't move. The truck engine idles outside for a moment, then cuts off. I hear footsteps, heavy ones. Then, the knock. It's firm. Familiar. Controlled. Naomi stirs, her eyes opening, fear flickering in them. "Mom." I raise a hand. "Stay there." I walk slowly to the door. Every step feels measured, steady. The night air seeps through the cracks, cool against my face. I unlock the latch and open it halfway. Cole stands there, head low, shoulders slumped. He looks smaller somehow, like the anger drained something vital out of him. His eyes dart toward Naomi behind me, then back to me. "Marlene," he starts, voice low, I'm sorry." The word hangs there, brittle, uncertain. "I shouldn't have yelled," he continues. "I shouldn't have thrown things. I lost it. I thought you were trying to embarrass me in front of everyone." I keep my expression calm. "You embarrassed yourself," I say evenly. He flinches, but doesn't argue. For a moment, the only sound is the wind moving through the trees. Finally, he says, "I just want to fix things. For Naomi. For the baby." I tilt my head slightly. "Fix things?" I echo. "Cole, forgiveness is free. But entry has a price, respect." He blinks, uncertain. "I respect you, I do." I step closer, lowering my voice. "Respect isn't a word. It's a way of living. It's what you do when no one's watching, like when you moved my husband's letters off that shelf, or when you threw my photos in the yard." His jaw tightens, shame flooding his face. He looks down at his boots, then back up. "I'll make it right," he mutters. "No," I say softly, shaking my head. "You'll make it elsewhere." I open the door wider, letting the porch light spill over his face. This home is not a battlefield. It's a place of peace. And I intend to keep it that way. He stares at me, the truth finally sinking in. Then, slowly, he nods, a broken kind of nod, like a man realizing he's been standing on someone else's land all along. "Take care of Naomi," he says quietly. "I always have," I reply. He glances past me one last time, eyes lingering on her. Then he turns and walks to his truck. The door closes with a hollow sound. The engine starts, fades into the distance, and then there's only silence, deep, full, final. I close the door gently, lock it, and lean against it for a moment, feeling the weight of everything lift off my shoulders. Naomi comes to me, tears slipping down her cheeks again, but this time, they're quiet tears, the kind that come from release, not fear. "He's really gone," she whispers. "For now," I say. "And maybe that's what needs to be." We stand there together, listening to the house breathe, the same walls that held our laughter, our fights, our silence. Tonight, they hold something new, freedom. I lead her to the couch, and we sit side by side. Outside, the first hints of dawn begin to touch the sky, faint streaks of pink breaking through the dark. "I don't know how to start over," Naomi says softly. I take her hand. "You already did," I reply. "The moment you opened your eyes to the truth, that was the start." She leans her head against my shoulder again, and I whisper, half to her, half to myself, "The house may have cracked, but it's still standing. And so are we." As the light grows stronger, I look toward the window. The porch light is still on, the one I've turned on every night since Harold passed. I never realized until now what it truly meant. It wasn't just for him. It was for all of us, a sign that this house, this heart, still welcomes light, no matter how long the dark stays. I stand, walk to the switch, and let it shine a little longer. Because peace, I've learned, isn't silence. It's knowing the storm has passed, and that the roof still holds. As the morning birds begin to sing, Naomi whispers from behind me, "Mom, what if he comes back?" I glance at the light, steady and bright. It's strange how quickly a house can change when the wrong kind of noise leaves it. The quiet isn't heavy anymore. It hums now, soft, steady, alive. Like the walls themselves are breathing easier. It's been 3 weeks since that night. Cole hasn't been back. The truck doesn't rumble down the street anymore. The air feels cleaner. Even the floorboards don't creak as much. Maybe it's just me, finally hearing peace after so much tension. Naomi and I spoke the morning after he left. She made the hardest choice of her life, to step away. Not just from him, but from the chaos that had started to swallow her whole. She moved into a small apartment across town for now, close enough that I can visit, far enough that she can rebuild without his shadow following her. I walk through the hallways sometimes, touching the walls, tracing the chipped paint with my fingers. I can still feel echoes of the arguments that once filled the space, but they're fading, like stains slowly washed out by sunlight. The house smells of cinnamon again. I started baking on Sundays, like I used to. There's something about the scent of warm bread that makes a home feel like forgiveness. I pass the old guest room, the one that Cole claimed for his future nursery. It's empty now, stripped bare, the walls pale and quiet. For a while, I couldn't bring myself to step inside. Every time I did, I'd see the ghost of that afternoon, my belongings tossed in boxes, my photographs discarded, his voice echoing like a wound. But healing, I've learned, isn't about pretending the wound never happened. It's about tending to the scar until it doesn't sting anymore. So one morning, I opened the door wide, rolled up my sleeves, and got to work. I started with the floor, sweeping away dust, bits of paint, forgotten nails. Then I washed the windows until the sunlight poured in like honey. The walls looked bare, but not lonely. They looked ready. I moved my husband's old bookshelf back in, the one Cole shoved into the garage months ago. I ran my hand along the wood, remembering Harold sanding it by hand when we first moved here. His books followed, Whitman, Baldwin, Angelou, Frost. Words that once shaped my lessons, now shaping my peace. I placed them one by one, slowly, like I was rebuilding something sacred. On the far side of the room, I set a single rocking chair facing the window. It creaked softly when I tested it, the kind of familiar sound that carries memory. I sat for a while, watching the maple tree sway outside. The leaves were starting to turn, red, then gold, then brown. Autumn always makes me reflective. That's when I realized, this room isn't waiting for anyone anymore. It isn't a nursery. It isn't a guest room. It's a sanctuary, a quiet space for what's left after the storm. I don't sit in that chair to wait. I sit there to rest. Each day has its rhythm now. Mornings with tea and the local paper. Afternoons tending to the small garden Harold planted years ago. The tomatoes are stubborn, the hydrangeas proud. Evenings filled with reading, journaling, and sometimes, silence. I've come to love silence. The right kind of silence. The kind that doesn't demand an answer, just peace. Naomi visits often. She's softer now, but stronger too. I can see it in her eyes, the kind of resolve that only grows from breaking and rebuilding yourself. Sometimes, she brings groceries or helps me dust the shelves. Sometimes, she just sits with me in the reading room, her hand resting on her belly. She's 5 months along now. The baby is starting to kick. I think he'll have your calm, she told me last week. I smiled. Or your father's stubbornness. She laughed, a real, unguarded laugh. It's been so long since I've heard it. Every once in a while, I catch her looking at the door, as if half expecting someone to appear. I don't say anything. I know what that look means. It's not longing, not anymore. It's habit. It takes time to unlearn the feeling of bracing yourself. But she's healing, one breath at a time. So am I. A few nights ago, I found one of Harold's old notes tucked inside a book. His handwriting, firm, patient, deliberate, still stops me in my tracks. It said, "Don't let the house forget it's yours." It felt like a message sent from some gentler world, one I could almost hear through the wind outside. I whispered back, "I didn't, Harold. Not for a second." Sometimes, when the house is especially quiet, I talk to him out loud. Not out of grief, out of gratitude. I tell him how Naomi is finding her strength again, how the garden is thriving, how the maple tree outside the window still blooms like clockwork. I think he'd be proud of the woman I became, not because I stood tall, but because I didn't let bitterness harden me. I pour my tea and carry it to the reading room. The late afternoon sun spills across the floor in gold slants, painting everything warm. I sink into the rocking chair, feeling the wood creak under me, the rhythm soft and slow. The sound takes me back to my classroom days, the rustle of papers, the murmur of young voices learning how to shape their own thoughts. I remember standing by the chalkboard, telling them that power isn't about being the loudest. It's about standing still when someone tries to push you off balance. It feels poetic now, that the same lesson came back to me, full circle, but harder, deeper. Peace doesn't arrive as a grand moment. It sneaks in through small details, a room cleaned, a meal shared, a door closed gently instead of slammed. Even the house seems to exhale differently now. The boards no longer groan beneath resentment, they hum with calm. Sometimes, I think about Cole. Not with anger, not anymore. I imagine him somewhere, sitting alone, replaying the night everything came undone. Maybe he's thinking about what he lost. Maybe he's learning what respect really costs. I don't wish him harm. I don't wish him back. I just wish him awareness, the kind that only comes when life mirrors your mistakes back at you. I sip my tea and close my eyes, letting the rocking motion lull me into reflection. I didn't lose a son-in-law, I whisper to the empty room. I regained my peace. And I mean it. Every word. Just then, the phone rings in the kitchen, a soft, distant chime that breaks the stillness. I set my cup down and walk slowly through the hallway. Each step feels deliberate, like a heartbeat. "Mom?" Naomi's voice comes through, warm but slightly uncertain. "I'm here, sweetheart." "I'm on my way over," she says. "There's something I need to show you." Her tone carries that mixture of calm and hesitation, like she's steadying herself. I don't ask questions. Some things, you let arrive in their own time. When she pulls into the driveway half an hour later, the sun is beginning to set. The sky is streaked with pink and orange, the kind of color that makes you want to stop and breathe. She steps out of her car, a soft sweater around her shoulders, her hair tied loosely back. She's carrying an envelope in her hand, plain, white, slightly crumpled. "Come in," I say, opening the door. She hesitates at the threshold, glancing around as if she's seeing the house differently. Maybe she is. The furniture's been rearranged. The air smells faintly of lavender and cinnamon. The rocking chair by the window catches the last rays of the sun. "This place feels lighter," she murmurs. "It should," I reply. "It finally remembers who it belongs to." She smiles faintly and follows me into the living room. We sit together on the couch, the envelope resting in her lap. For a long moment, neither of us speaks. Then she takes a slow breath and says, "It's from Cole." My heart doesn't jolt. It just settles, steady, curious, but not afraid. She slides the letter out carefully. The paper is folded twice, neat handwriting across the top. She reads silently at first, eyes scanning, lips tightening. Then she passes it to me. I take it, feeling the weight of it, not from the ink, but from what it represents. I unfold it slowly, the paper whispering as it opens. "Naomi, I've been thinking a lot about what happened. About your mother. About myself. I see now how much I hurt both of you. I don't expect forgiveness, but I wanted to say I'm sorry. I'm getting help, real help this time. If you'll allow it, I'd like to be there for our child when the time comes. If not, I'll understand. Tell your mother I was wrong." I fold the letter carefully, setting it on the coffee table between us. Naomi's eyes fill with tears again, but not the same kind as before. These are softer, a kind of release. "What should I do?" she asks quietly. I reach across the table and take her hand. "You don't have to decide tonight," I tell her. "Sometimes the heart needs silence before it speaks again." She nods slowly. Outside, the wind brushes against the window, stirring the chimes gently. The sound isn't haunting anymore. It's healing. We sit there as twilight deepens, neither of us speaking. Just breathing. Just being. After a while, she looks toward the reading room and smiles faintly. "You finished it." "I did," I say. "Want to see?" She nods, and I lead her inside. The last of the daylight rests on the shelves, glinting off the spines of old books. The rocking chair waits quietly by the window. Naomi runs her fingers along the edge of the shelf, pausing on one of her father's books, the collected poems of Langston Hughes. She opens it, reading aloud, "Hold fast to dreams, for if dreams die, life is a broken-winged bird that cannot fly." We stand in silence for a long time. Then she turns to me and whispers, "You kept his light alive, Mom." I smile, not out of pride, but peace. "That's what love does," I say softly. "It doesn't vanish. It transforms." She leans against me, and together we look out the window as the sky deepens into dusk. The house feels full again, not of people, but of presence. Of strength. Of memory made calm. And for the first time in a long while, I realize I'm not waiting for anything anymore. I'm home. As the evening quiets, Naomi's phone buzzes on the table. She glances at it, then at me. "It's him again," she says softly. I look toward the porch light glowing outside, steady as ever. "Then let the light answer for us," I whisper. And in the quiet that follows, I know, peace isn't what's left after loss. It's what you build in its place. I remember the sound of that evening before anything else, the way the wind moved through the oak trees, carrying the faint hum of cicadas. The house had been quiet for weeks now. Too quiet, maybe, but not the kind that aches. It was the kind that breathes. Naomi arrived just before dusk. Her car rolled slowly up the gravel path, headlights washing over the porch where I sat with my knitting needles resting idle on my lap. When she stepped out, I noticed the hesitation in her walk, the way guilt still tugged at her shoulders like a heavy coat she couldn't quite take off. She held something in her hand. A folded letter. I didn't need to ask who it was from. Mom, she said softly. Her voice cracked on the second syllable. I nodded toward the chair beside me. Come sit before the tea gets cold. We sat for a long while, listening to the wind push leaves across the yard. The porch light above us flickered once, then steadied. Funny thing, that light had been there since before Naomi was born. My husband, Harold, had installed it himself, saying a home should always have a light to guide its people back. I used to tease him about it. Now it feels like the only thing in this house that's never failed me. Naomi opened the letter carefully, as if afraid it might fall apart. It's from Cole, she said, though we both already knew. She began to read. His words trembled across the page. Naomi, I've had time to think. I see now how pride can blind a man. I thought control was love, but all it ever did was push you, and your mother, away. I destroyed something sacred. I'm not asking for another chance. I'm asking for forgiveness, so I can start learning what respect truly means. She stopped reading halfway through. Her lips quivered. He's been seeing a counselor, she whispered. He says he wants to do better. I reached over and took her hand. Wanting is a start, I said. But peace isn't built on promises. It's built on actions that repeat until they no longer feel like effort. Naomi nodded, staring out into the darkening yard. I could see her struggling, torn between memory and hope, between what she'd lost and what she still wanted to believe in. Do you think people really change, Mom? She asked. I let out a slow breath. People can change, I said. But you can't build your home on the version of them you're praying for. You have to see who they are when no one's watching. She turned to me then, eyes glistening, face caught between daughter and mother, girl and woman. You're not angry with him anymore, are you? I smiled faintly. No, sweetheart. Anger takes energy I'd rather spend on peace. The night deepened. Naomi wandered through the house for a while, her fingers brushing against old furniture, photographs, door frames. I watched her from the doorway. Every step she took was like a slow exhale from a story that had held its breath too long. When she reached the reading room, she paused. That space used to be the nursery she'd painted with Cole, soft yellow walls, white lace curtains. Now, it held Harold's books. My rocking chair faced the window, a quilt folded neatly across it. Naomi smiled at that. You turned it into something warm again, she said. I turned it back into what it always should have been, I replied. A room that holds peace, not expectation. She nodded thoughtfully. Then, almost shyly, she asked, Can I read one of Dad's books? I felt something soften inside me. Of course you can. She sat cross-legged on the floor, opening an old volume of poems Harold used to love. I watched her read silently for a while, her lips moving just slightly as if tasting the words. And in that moment, the house didn't feel empty anymore, it felt alive again, with something real, something healed. Later, when the moon rose high, we went back to the porch. I carried 2 cups of warm tea, Naomi carried her courage. She looked out into the street and said, I might go see him next week. Just talk. I didn't stop her. I just said, go with a boundary, not a wound. And if you see the same old habits, leave with your peace intact. She laughed quietly, wiping a tear. You always make it sound so easy. It's not, I said, smiling. It just sounds that way when you've already done the hardest parts. A silence stretched between us, full but not uncomfortable. Then she asked, Do you ever miss him, Mom? Dad, I mean? I looked up at the porch light glowing softly above us. Every day, I said. But missing someone doesn't mean you want them back. It means you're grateful they were here. Naomi leaned her head on my shoulder. You're the strongest person I know. I chuckled. Strength isn't loud, Naomi. It's quiet. It's the decision to keep turning on the light, even when no one's coming home. I don't know how long we sat there before she stood up to leave. She hugged me tightly, the kind of hug that carries both apology and gratitude. "Thank you," she whispered. "For everything. For not giving up on me." "Never," I said. "I was just waiting for you to see yourself the way I always did." She smiled, tears glinting under the porch light, and then she drove off into the night, taillights vanishing into a calm horizon. I watched until they disappeared, the air cool against my skin, the world finally quiet. When I turned back toward the house, something inside me settled. Maybe it was closure. Maybe it was peace. Or maybe it was just the gentle knowing that every story, no matter how painful, eventually leads you home, if you're brave enough to walk through it. Later that night, I made myself a cup of cocoa and stood by the window, looking out at the porch. That old light glowed like a star against the darkness, steady and patient. It reminded me of everything I'd learned, that silence can speak louder than shouting. That dignity is love with boundaries. That forgiveness doesn't always mean return, sometimes it just means release. I whispered to myself, almost like a prayer, every night, I turn on the porch light, not for who's coming, but for who stayed. And in that moment, I realized who stayed wasn't just Naomi or even me, it was the woman I became through all the storms, the one who refused to let bitterness steal her gentleness. Then, softly, as if speaking to the air, or maybe to every soul who's ever been where I've been, I said, "Peace isn't silence. It's knowing you don't have to shout to be heard." The camera would linger there, if this were a film, the porch glowing in the darkness, the rocking chair gently swaying in the breeze, the house alive with quiet dignity. And then, my voice, steady, warm, familiar. Wherever you're listening from. Have you ever had to reclaim your peace the hard way? Tell me your story in the comments. And if you believe dignity is love with boundaries, join our circle. Subscribe to Voices of Aunty Mae.